We live? Okay, thank you. Meeting is called to order at 6:01 p.m. May we have a roll call, please, Lindsay?
Yes. Chairperson Phil Goldstein.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Marty Jost.
Here.
Commissioner Tom Wood.
Here.
Commissioner Wendy Newland. Here. Commissioner Mike Lewis.
Here.
Alternate Michael Lowry.
Here.
Alternate Renzo Bianchi.
Thank you. Amendments to the agenda. I'm going to quickly go through a couple things. I'm going to move that would normally be covered under reports that I think are more appropriate to cover here at the beginning. So I'm going to move them up to the beginning here. First of all, we do have a new alternate commissioner. His name is Renzo Bianchi. And in case you wondered, he let us know at the time he interviewed that he was going to unfortunately have to miss the meeting on this date. So we were very much aware of it, and we would anticipate at our next meeting that he will be here, and we'll welcome him at that time. Several of us were able to attend what was called Bob's Rules of Order. This was a presentation that the mayor had initiated and set up, at which a gentleman presented a very helpful, I would say, presentation on protocol for meetings. And those of us who were able to attend, I think we graded out, safe to say we graded out very well. And with one exception, it appears that yours truly has been neglecting to call for discussion following a motion and second. So if you wonder why we make that modest change tonight, and you've been familiar with Robert's Rules of Order all these years and just didn't want to hurt my feelings, certainly you'll understand why we're making that change. And please, somebody correct me if I've neglected to do it. I've only been doing it wrong for 13 years here. Next thing is, understand that Vice Chair Marty Jost may have to leave early, so unless anybody wonders about that. If he does, our alternate, because we would next cover determination of alternate voting. Michael, you will vote if there's any items left unaddressed at that time. Otherwise, you will not vote until he leaves. I wanted to mention to the commissioners, following up on council's meeting in which the land use code amendments previously considered by the Planning Commission were on the agenda, specifically oil and gas regulations. If you recall, we added recommendations that two things: notices of oil and gas proposals, oil and gas development proposals. We added a recommendation to council that notices would go out to all residents of Timnath, not those within a certain geographic area. That passed council. I'm pleased to say that passed council on a 4-1 vote. We also added a recommendation that any waiver requests on the part of the developer be considered before council as a whole, thus allowing for public transparency and comment, and that passed on a 5-0 vote. So whichever of you collectively or as a whole came up with those, certainly good job. I think we earned our keep. I did hear following that meeting, heard a couple residents mention that they appreciated Planning Commission making those recommendations, and they certainly appreciated council supporting them. Lastly, another minor change in procedure starting tonight. I think one that has major benefits for the public. Planning Commission has campaigned for some time to allow public comment directly on site plans. I won't go into the logic or illogic why it has been different, but typically for a number of years there was no public comment on site plans, and one of the items on tonight's agenda is considered a site plan. Planning Commission and I believe council even did find a kind of a loophole and has allowed public comment during the general public comment, which will be coming up here in a moment. But it's a big change to do this. Appreciate staff's support of this. This was something that our community development directors felt strongly about, and I think this is a very positive change to give the public an opportunity to comment directly during discussion of a site plan issue. Okay, with that, mentioned the administrative item number 3, determination of alternate voting. Public comment. This is general public comment. This is a time for anybody who wishes to speak, whether they signed in or not, on an item that is not on the agenda. Lindsay, anybody signed up, if there's a distinction on general public comment? Anybody signed up?
Yes, it does appear that we have a few people signed up for general public comment.
Okay, and this is, again, for those of you first time in a meeting, this is something that is not on the agenda. There is an opportunity, once again, for both items on the agenda for public comment. So, Lindsay, why don't you read the names, and if it is something that is not on the agenda, you'll come up in turn. And let me remind you while you're doing that, our policy is you're allowed 3 minutes, and we appreciate if you could keep it civil. And there will be, and then following the general public comment, as it is with the individual item, individual agenda item comment, we then close public comment, and there is no debate, if you will, from that point forward. So who's first, please?
We have a Garrett Morgan.
Garrett, I think, is that microphone on? There's a button that looks like a little person talking there. This is so the many thousands of people watching online can hear it too.
1,000. I've seen the streams. It's not.
Okay, Garrett, thank you.
Hi, I'm not sure if this is the right group to communicate with, but having some questions, comments, and just trying to understand your planning department and how to get a response from them. I realize this is the Planning Commission, which I'm sure you guys work closely with our planning department. I see at least one of the people that I've emailed and haven't received a response from. So I'm just curious, what's the protocol when you email the government, when you email the local government, Timnath.gov or whichever it is, what is an acceptable time frame to receive a response? And this is a general question.
Well, we don't normally respond, but I think what I would say is I believe our staff as a whole here at the town, I've been doing this, I predate everybody now,
okay,
except the town clerk. I've been doing this for a long time. Found our staff end to end to be very responsive. They are very busy, certainly, but I believe if in fact your inquiry requires or it would be prudent to respond, I believe they are. God, if there's anything you want to add, we can certainly do that. We don't normally do this, but I certainly would give you the opportunity.
I would just say that staff does our best to respond as quickly as possible. Sometimes some items do require some additional research depending on the inquiry. Public records requests have a different timeline than general requests to the department, but again, we do our best to follow up with residents who contact us. I try to encourage my staff to at least confirm that we received the message, and we'll follow up with you. And so if that has not happened, I apologize.
Have you received my message?
We have received multiple messages from you, and we continue to research the items that you have.
I laid it out pretty clear what the problem is. I mean, it's verbatim from land use code. So my biggest question is, I have these problems, I can't get resolved. How do I know anything happening here is actually going to what is supposed to happen?
Garrett, I think you've been heard loud and clear here, and I suspect they will, and I take them at their word. If they are something that needs to be researched, I believe they will reply. Lindsay?
Next, we have a Jedediah D.
Is there a Jedediah I hear?
That's the address.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Next, we have a Dan Griffith.
I think sometimes people sign, there's one line, one to sign in general is there, and then one to sign in to speak. So maybe that's what happened.
That might be what happened. They are signed on both.
Okay, all right. Anybody else for general public comment that didn't sign in? Something that's not on the agenda?
We have no one else signed up to speak on general public comment.
Okay, we close the general public comment. Item number 5, the consent agenda consists solely of approval of the June 18th, 2024 meeting minutes. Commissioners, any additions or corrections to the minutes? Nope. Nope. All right, hearing none, do I have a motion on business item 5A?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I assume I don't have discussion on anything. Just practicing for when I do. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda can carry on a 5-0 vote. Business, we have, first of all, business items 6A, Trailside Multifamily Site Plan. So as per our protocol, the staff, in this case, Logan Graves, will present the business item, the proposal. The developer will have an opportunity, if present, to speak as necessary, to share anything else that we need to hear. We will then open it up for public comment on the item. We'll close public comment, then we'll bring it up front for questions from the commissioners. So, Logan.
Okay. The Trailside Multifamily Site Plan is an application for multifamily residential development consisting of 3 56-unit buildings totaling 168 dwelling units. The subject property, okay, it's switching, is located south of Harmony Boulevard, east of Signal Tree Drive, west of Kidd Street, and north of Stonefly Drive in the Trailside development, so right over here next to us. In terms of process, this property was a part of the Rendezvous Planned Development Overlay Zoning and Rendezvous subdivision process. Site plans are one of the final steps in the land development process, and staff used the site plan criteria in section 299 of the Land Use Code to review the proposal. Our land use code requires a neighborhood meeting and approval by town council for properties with 2 or more buildings. A neighborhood meeting was held on May 2nd, and the observation report was included in your packet. So to begin, I'd like to zoom out a little bit and provide some context. We did receive some questions regarding the zoning, and then I'll zoom back in. So the zoning for this property is R3, mixed residential, with a planned development overlay, which was approved in January of 2018. A planned development overlay is a zoning district that allows for flexible land use and design regulations. So the intent of this is really to encourage things like innovative site design, a mix of residential dwelling types. So it's an added layer of planning control applied to a parcel of land, and it supersedes the density requirements of R3. So on the left is the approved plan development overlay, and you can see the site highlighted. And then the colored pop-out image is a conceptual exhibit submitted during the sketch plan phase, showing both senior housing and multifamily uses being considered at the earliest stages of this development. The table below compares what was entitled with the approval of the plan development overlay and what is actually being built. So zooming in now, the subject property had an approved site plan dated January 11th, 2022 for active adult housing. And the proposal before you largely retains the original design, with changes primarily to the parking lots and detention ponds due to the different parking requirement for multifamily, as shown in this table. So So here are the two site plans side by side with the biggest change highlighted in red. Surface parking is proposed where a detention pond was previously located and is now undergrounded. A summary of the changes from the previous submittal include the parking count increased by 112 spaces, the reduction of one surface detention pond, some of the amenities changed to appeal to a wider range of age groups, enhanced landscaping was incorporated along Stonefly Drive. The applicant is exceeding the open space requirement, providing approximately 3 acres with 1.29 of that being usable. That usable open space area includes the clubhouse, outdoor pool, outdoor kitchen and gathering space, a flexible lawn area, and a dog park. So here's a colored rendering of the entire site. And then pictured are the elevations of the buildings, which are similar across all 3 buildings. And then here are some views of the development from across Stonefly. Staff finds that the site plan meets the review criteria laid out in Section 299 and complies with the requirements outlined in the Land Use Code and the Plan Development Overlay. We are recommending approval of the site plan application and we'll pass it off to Norse Design for their presentation.
Good. Everybody hear me now? That works?
Yes, could you, and your
Definitely.
name is, please?
Ryan McBreen with Norris Design, 244 North College Avenue, Fort Collins, Colorado. Thank you, Logan. Appreciate that great presentation and appreciate staff's assistance getting us here tonight. She did a really great job kind of going through the ins and outs of this application. Don't have a lot more to add. I'll go through a few extra slides here. Obviously, we know we're located now, just right next door to our property where we are sitting right now. But just to reiterate, there's a few familiar faces that we were here when we were here a year and a half ago. We were pursuing a senior housing project, and due to different circumstances that out of our control, we had to change it to more of a market rate product. But the intent is not to change the character, the feel, or the quality of the project in that change or modification to use. And because of that change of use, as Logan mentioned, we have to increase parking. And with that increase in parking, had to come to the site plan in front of you. Density is the same, architecture is the same. The layout is almost exactly the same, except for where we added some parking. Here they are side by side. Color renderings make it a little easier to see, but you can see on the right side where formerly detention pond B was in a garage, we removed that and added parking there. Generally speaking, the rest of the project is the same. The building architecture is the same. Like I said, high quality landscape and highly amenitized project are all the same. A couple different adds, should add. For discussions with staff, we actually enhanced the building entrances, some of the architecture there. And then additionally, the garages on the west side, noted as number 7 there on the right side, we actually added another band of architectural stone just to give it a little more visual interest to it. And then additionally, after some conversations with the neighbors, we added a lot more landscaping on the south side of Building 3 that's depicted in some of those graphics that you saw earlier. You all have seen these images. I think we depict what we're trying to do fairly well here moving forward with the project. As Logan pointed out, we believe we're in conformance with the Rendezvous P overlay, as well as the Timnath Town Code, and staff is in support of this request. And this evening, we respectfully request your support this evening in recommendation for approval. I am joined tonight by the project developer, Spencer Edwards, and then also our project engineer as well. So we're happy to answer any and all questions you might have about the project this evening. So
Okay, Randy, right?
Ryan,
Ryan?
yes.
Ryan, okay. All right, Ryan, has anybody signed up for public comment on this? And if anybody didn't sign up for public comment on this item, they can still speak, certainly, but let's get through the ones that did sign up first. And then Ryan will bring you back up, as well as any other members of your team necessary to answer. If you would, you may remember last time around, if you could perhaps take some notes or remember some of these, we may have you address some of the comments.
We do not have anyone signed up to speak on this.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak on this business item? Okay. Garrett. State your name and address again, if you would, please, Garrett.
Garrett Morgan, 5772 Jedediah Drive. So I've become very familiar with the land use codes. It's a big document, good times. And maybe I missed something, so, if I did, fantastic. I'd love for some clarification. But under the multifamily dwelling land use code, it specifically states that there are 8 units per building allowed in the R3 district. So how do we get to 168 over 3 buildings? That's really the big question I have. Is this the PDU, planned district overlay, or what? How do we get from 24 to 168?
Okay, do you have any other questions on this one? Because I'm going to get somebody to address that, but if you have any other questions.
No, that's my
Okay.
biggest issue with this development.
All right.
It seems like a classic bait and switch. Also, with somebody saying that uses change outside of their control, except it happened on every single one of their developments that they put forth, that they've started with an adult living facility, which is one of the reasons we wanted to move here, for that extra diversity into our neighborhood. And then to wait till the entire neighborhood is almost built out, and then to say, oh, just kidding, it's going to be a heavy density families living across the street from you that are going to be turning over on possibly a 6-month or annual basis. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's also ridiculous that the development sign that is now out front in that property has been knocked over for the last month, and not a single person in the town lifted it up to stake it back in the ground. Don't worry, I took care of that on the way over because I walked here. So that's back up now. But these are things, how are people supposed to know what's happening if somebody knocks it over? It's very clearly knocked over. Like, how is nobody taking responsibility for that? It seems suspicious to me, and I suspect that this won't end well for the residents in Trailside.
Thank you. Staff, this seems the issue on the 8-unit, suppose this is best lobbed over to you. Please.
Certainly. So a planned development overlay was approved in 2018, which superseded the 8 dwelling units per acre to allow 24 dwelling units per acre. The density did not change from the senior use to now the multifamily use, so the density is the same.
Great, and that still applies, obviously, it still applies to this circumstance. In other words, it's not necessary, as I understand it, to go through that process again.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I'm sure also if whomever put the sign up, and by the way, appreciate you putting that back. I'm sure and we appreciate you putting that back up as well. I'd like to think that wasn't malicious. I can't think of any reason why it would be, other than the winds we get around here. But so Lindsay, we have nobody else signed up. Anybody else wish to speak? All right, we now close the public comment. Ryan, if you want to come back up, I imagine the commissioners will have some questions. Who would like to go first? Wendy?
Thanks. I just want to take a few steps back. So page 7 of 52 on our packet, it states that the owner is Timnath Living LLC. Is it Timnath Living or is it Hosman Construction that owns the project?
I'll defer to the owner here.
Spencer Edwards, Lincoln, Nebraska, 8885 Executive Woods, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68512. The owner of the site, the LLC, is Timnath Living LLC. That is a LLC owned by Hausman Development.
Got it. Okay, thanks. And then the May 2nd neighborhood meeting, there was Hausman present, which was you, right? There was staff, and then there was Dave Pendleton from Olson. Who's Olson? Who's that?
Yep, civil engineer.
Got it. Okay, thanks. And then I just want to get some clarification on the neighborhood meeting minutes. You mentioned you have a third-party management company. Do you have the same third-party management company for all of your apartments?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And somebody asked the question at the meeting, how many buildings does Hosman own in Colorado? And you said 0, but we have buildings in Nebraska and Arkansas. But your website says you've been building in Colorado for 6 years with an office in Loveland, projects in Silverthorne and Frisco, and a workforce housing project, Steamboat Springs. So were you referring to 55-plus communities?
No, so what I was referring to is the different entities under the Hausman Corporation. So we have the construction arm, which is Hausman Construction,
Okay.
as well as Hausman Development. And Hausman Development is the company, the entity that develops, builds, and retains the multifamily developments, the apartments throughout Nebraska, Arkansas, Carolina, and has this ground in Timnath.
Okay.
So it's a different branch.
Yeah, I
Housing
saw that on
Construction
your
has the
letterhead.
Loveland office for the construction part of it. And they
Okay.
would be the contractors building this.
Okay. And then you have other 55-plus communities. Looks like one's in Rogers.
Yes,
Okay. And then, is that the only one?
that is. So that was the initial one that we did. And during COVID, after COVID, the demographic kind of switched and the lease up was not there. And so to make it economical, we had to widen the demographic of renters. And so that was one that it was fully intended to be an active adult living, but it just wasn't there in the market. And for us to make that project go and not be a failure, we needed the switch.
So it is not a 55-plus anymore?
Correct, no.
Okay.
And that's the same as here. It's still set up with the higher end amenities, all the resident activations, additional staff and management on site, similar to here, but it's just open to a wider demographic, not 55-plus.
Okay. So you don't have any 55-plus communities?
No.
So what is it about Timnath that makes you think it wouldn't be successful?
Well, one, it's a capital piece. We've been through the process, and it has not been a good project for us, so that's one big thing. We don't want to put up a $50 million project with, the millions of dollars that we've already invested in this now to have it be a dud and then go bankrupt on that. It's all internal Hausman capital that is used, so we have to do what's best for our company as a whole. And this is what we fit through talking to our third-party management companies, other affiliates we have on the coast that do have the age-targeted or the senior living homes. They've seen a lot of slowdown in their lease-ups and activations, and so this is just something that we were not willing to pursue to have it go upside down. We still, enjoy the area. We want to be here, but we want to have a successful project, not just for us, but for the community.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Mike?
Thank you. So just adding on to that a little bit, if I may. The other communities that you plan to be 55 plus also changed. Is that what you were saying?
They also changed, yes.
In other areas?
Yes.
And when were those built?
The one in Northwest Arkansas, so that was the only one that we went through this
Okay.
trial and tribulation with. That was built in 21 and 22.
Okay.
So
All right. 'Cause I was just wondering, because this was originally 2018 that you said 55 plus, correct?
that's when the PD overlay was passed.
Okay.
We did not acquire the ground until late 21, early 22.
Okay. Yeah, I just wondered when the dynamic changed. Thank you. I've got a question for Ryan as well. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening.
You said in your presentation that the density is the same?
Correct.
And you mean the density, when you say density, you mean the building density?
The number of units is
Not the
exactly the same.
population density?
The 19 DUs an acre is exactly the same as it's
Right.
unchanged. Yeah, 168 units.
It's safe to say the population density will increase significantly?
No, not safe to say. We have 1 and 2 bedrooms units there.
So why the requirement for the parking increase if
that's
the population won't increase significantly?
Timnath Town Code requirement requires more parking going for standard housing as opposed to senior housing.
Okay, so you don't think there'll be more people?
Well, I can't speak for that, but no, I don't believe so. But a lot of times when you have a senior population, maybe they have one car versus two because they're not driving to work every day,
Okay,
right? That's the logic. I'm guessing that's the Timnath Town Code, the reason they have a differentiating factor
Okay.
there.
all right, appreciate it, thanks.
Tom?
Yeah, I actually think that the parking's a good idea because the apartments across the other side of the street, they overflowed all up and down the street, so I think that that's actually a good thing, so I appreciate that. But one thing I noticed, you've deleted a stormwater pond, and when this project came up previously, I raised a question about the stormwater drainage system, the underground drainage gallery on the south side of Building 3.
Sure.
Along the roadway was very close to the foundations of the building and very deep. And given the soil conditions here and so forth, I suggested that maybe you look at alternatives. I don't see any changes to the plans. Is that something you've looked at? Are you still going with the same drainage gallery, or have you got some other plan?
Sure. Well, I'm going to take a stab at this, but let my engineer drop up here. But just so you know, we did not get rid of detention pond. We just undergrounded it under that parking lot, so it's still the same
So
volume.
you're going to do
there.
the same underground gallery?
Correct. And then, we've worked closely with staff, and, our team has a lot of experience doing this, so they believe the solutions that we're bringing forward as part of this are sufficient for the project to be successful and not have construction issues. Hausman's developing a project. They intend to keep it and operate it. They obviously don't want any issues with it.
Are you familiar with some of the failures down in Denver or down in Loveland where they've had dramatic failures, caving into the parking lot, cracking in the foundations?
Yeah, it's a Front Range issue all across the Front Range, right?
Right.
And it's highly swelling soils and all that. Yep, very familiar with it. And I know we have geotech. I'll just let the civil engineer come up here.
Hi, David Pendleton at Olson, 1880 Fall River Drive, Loveland, Colorado. So we have geotech reports that our team had designed as well to test the soil that's out there. We've been working with ADS, who is the underground detention system, to make sure that there's a liner underneath it to help from that moisture to get away from the actual detention there and in towards the foundation, which would be one of the concerns that you have. And we've been working with our structural team to make sure that that loading is away from that ADS system. So there's a lot of measures in play to kind of help make sure that when it is constructed, it's constructed appropriately.
Okay, yeah, I just don't think that the initial concept is very conservative, and I just worry that you're planning to build something that's going to fail based on past history and so forth, particularly here in the soil conditions. I'm sure you've had engineers look at it. I've been an engineer for 40-some-odd years in geotechnical things. This is a big concern, and I encourage you to work with staff to make sure that you build something that's not going to fall down.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Tom, would you want Justin and Steve to our Public Works and engineer?
Yeah, I think if
Anything you
Public
wanna-
Works could work with
Anything
their
you want to
engineer.
add or comment on Tom's comment?
Yes, thank you. Steve Human, TST Consulting Engineers, contract with the town of Timnath. I do understand what Tom is saying. We do, as staff, lean on the developers, engineers, and professionals to come up with their best design. I don't believe staff should and will actually, nor is Tom suggesting this, dictate actual design, because then we become responsible and liable for it. But I do understand Tom's comment in asking the developer to maybe take a second look at this and make sure that they are very, very confident that this is going to work, because if it did not work, it's solely on them and not any liability on the town whatsoever, I think is what we want to make clear and put on the record.
Thank you, Phil. I think I'm satisfied.
Are you
I
satisfied?
think I've said what I can say.
Okay. Michael, anything down? Okay. Marty?
Okay. So height, the height of this is the same as senior living? Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
one of the drawings in there had it at 39.15, I think it was, but that wasn't to the top.
Sounds correct.
So if it was at the peak it would put it over the 40 limit on the land use code. So I guess this is more, how is that being handled if this is over, I think it was 18%?
Sorry, my computer shut down. I'll look it up too. I know they're looking right now.
Because the land use code is 35, and this one was 39.15, but the 18% puts it at 40 feet. And with the peaks, it's going to be, would think, higher than that.
Yeah, I assume you want staff to, maybe that's what they're huddling up on.
I think that's-
Staff to comment on this as well. So we have a variance request?
No.
We believe it was a waiver request with the active adult living site plan, but we can confirm that.
Okay, we'll have to circle back to this. It would seem that we need to ascertain that. We'll see when we get to the end of this item. We'll see how best to handle that. Let's see what else comes up. But obviously, that's an issue, if not a big issue.
And
Marty?
with that, are there any new variances with this? No. Okay.
Brian says no. Lindsay, or Logan, no other variances. Okay.
Okay. All right, so the other is the parking. We talked about it a little bit. I thought in the packet, it said 1.6 to 2. What is the actual ratio on this that is supposed to be?
Yeah, one bedrooms are 1.5 spaces, and then 2 bedrooms, I believe, are 1.7 spaces per dwelling unit.
Okay.
And then you get to 3 bedrooms, and it goes to 2.
So given the whole mix there, how many parking spots does land use code say compared to how many is actual?
I believe 268 are required, and they are providing 274 because of the EV requirement.
Mm-hmm.
The EV is on top of the base parking requirement.
Yeah. So given the issues we see across the street there, I mean, my son lives there, so I know what a mess the parking is. And even if there's enough parking spots, people still want to park on the street, you know, so the road here doesn't have room to park, and one side is no parking already. I don't believe the other side is. So both sides of the street, in my opinion, should be made no parking because it's just too narrow. If people are parked on both sides, I don't think you would get a fire truck through there. And then Stonefly, and it would also, it covers up the bike lanes, which is a safety issue. And then on Stonefly, I'm concerned that there isn't any no parking signs, and there's a little bit of a margin between the bike lane and the curb, but not enough to park a car without taking up the bike lane, which is a safety issue because we have some of those. And then even with the no parking, there's no parking out in Wild Wing on whole sides of the street, and I don't think there's ever been in the history of Timnath one parking ticket written out there. So all of that together, this is going to be a parking issue, I think.
I'll defer to engineering to respond.
Yeah, I want to hear the engineering, and then I've got I'll add some things to the park.
Yeah, so on Kidd Street, it is a local street. There is no parking. There's actually signs that say no parking, and it's a bike lane. So then if somebody parked there, they would be ticketed.
Both sides?
Yes, on both sides.
Okay.
And then on Stonefly Drive, that is a collector street, so it is designed, we could, verify the width, but it was designed for parking in the bike lanes. So that would be a public street, so there would be allowed on Stonefly potentially if, they needed to use that. So, with the standards, there's no variances. So that would be one concern that Public Works would have if there was variances given. So we support that the requirements are met with no variances.
And are the townhomes across the street, they park on the street? On Stonefly?
Is that the ones across on the east of Three Bell or west of Three Bell?
Along, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe Steve, do you know on that? I think
I believe that there is.
Stonefly, is that allowed parking? I think there is parking on the north side of Stonefly over there, but I do not think there's any parking on Three Bell, but.
You're talking about the apartment?
Yeah, the ones to the west, correct? Is that the ones you're talking about existing?
Yeah, the one's closest to here. I'm not sure what the street name is.
The apartment complex.
No.
No.
Here. No, I know they park
Yeah.
over there. You can't even pull out there without
I
somebody.
do believe that Stonefly does have parking all the way down. I can actually take a quick look at Google Earth and tell you for sure. Okay, thank you.
Yep, I think all the way down to.
Corey Flood, do you have any, I see you relating to this. Is there anything you want to remiss? The more the merrier. Is there anything you want to add?
I believe it does have parking all the way down on both sides.
Okay, I saw your head nodding. I figured we don't care who hits the home run as long as we win the game here. Marty, anything else before I?
No, that's my biggest concern about this whole thing is just, it's a pretty small area, and I don't see how you can fit all the cars in. And you had something on that as well?
Yeah, I do. Let me ask, I'm going to ask a couple probably simpler ones and circle back, leave parking for last here. On the neighborhood meeting, Ryan, let's see, page 30, under building and leasing questions, and this may be for Logan, you were at that meeting? Yeah, you were representing the town. And Chad was there, okay. So it says building leasing questions / leasing questions. It says, will this look like the apartment on the west? The answer is the council member said they didn't want it to look like it. To what does that refer? What council member are we referring to?
I think it was probably some ad hoc conversation that was had, and they wanted something that looked a different type of multifamily project, I think is what that was referring to. Are we talking about real time, if you will, meaning in the context of the neighborhood meeting? Was just curious. Yeah, I think it was part of just a discussion that evening. It was, we gave a presentation. There was a lot of just discussion over, over the hour that we met with them. Oh, here we go. Spencer's
Okay, yeah, whatever you can add, I'll take you to.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that. So previously, when we were going through this process 18 months ago, there was a comment from one of the council members, I don't believe still sitting here, sorry, commission members, and the comment was just for the exterior facades and that aesthetic of it, and wanted it to be different than what was currently there with the Trailside apartment complex. So I believe that was the address there.
Okay, Spencer, Spencer, right?
Yes.
So that refers to the previous iteration of this.
That is correct, yes. So yeah, all exterior facades, that has all been kept the same except enhancing of building entrances that was worked through with planning.
And this would have, because this is a site plan with multiple buildings, it still goes to council following whatever actions we take, and it would have gone to them back then. Okay. And then on page 31, and you may not have the same page numbers. and this kind of, this kind of goes over here to Justin. The very last section, which was probably miscellaneous questions, one of the residents in attendance said, is snow removal going to happen? And the answer was, that is on the city. May I presume that is incorrect, that the city does not, the town in this case, does not plow the parking lot?
Yeah, can I?
Yes.
Comment on that? So that was a twofold question. It was regarding, yes, the property itself, which will be taken care of by the management company and a third-party vendor, take care of that. But then they started discussing Kid Street and Stonefly, and that was the question directed towards the city, and just the responsiveness of snow removal.
Okay. All right. In any event, it's a given that the property owner, in this case, would be taking care of the...
Yes.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Just to let everybody know, I was reading these little things. We'll get back to the height variance question. I think parking is a huge issue. So again, Marty was the only one that's been here anywhere near as long as I have, but going back to the apartments across the street, at that time, Planning Commission was convinced that there was a reduction in the number of parking spaces. We were convinced. That's probably not the best way to look at it. Staff suggested that it would be acceptable to reduce the number of parking spaces beyond what was the standard at that point. Some of the logic was that there was a second phase coming and there would be spillover. And sometimes that logic is used, and Marty, you may recall too, with some other developments where adjacent commercial or residential areas, sometimes you look at the spillover and it's acceptable to reduce the number of parking spaces. But the apartment complex, it proved out clearly, as we hear about all the time, that it became a problem. And am I correct? I thought I heard somebody indicated that they started charging for parking. Does anybody start charging, the apartment complex, charging for parking, hence that increased the problem out on the street?
Yeah, they have two zones, and one zone you have to pay monthly to park in one of the spots there.
So I did hear, I did hear in a different context, the chief of police mentioned that the apartment complex has more police calls than second only to Walmart. I'm not casting stones at Walmart necessarily. And I don't know that it's necessarily all parking related, but we do hear on Planning Commission, and certainly council hears a lot about the problems created with the parking over there as it relates to the on-street parking. So very concerned about creating an additional problem. So first question is for staff. It appears, if I understood, could you put the graphic back up about the parking, please, Logan? Okay, so staff, am I correct that the required parking, first of all, the formula upon which that's based, I presume we find that to be sound in terms of number of spaces, and is that rounded up? We obviously, so it's essentially,
Yes.
it's essentially two spaces for every dwelling unit, but we don't, the math doesn't seem to work. Aren't there 168?
There are 88 one-bedrooms and 86 two-bedrooms, and so that calcs out to 268 spaces required.
Okay.
And
that
They have
include,
an additional requirement for EV spaces.
okay, does that include the garages? I remember last time around, there was a question.
Yes.
That includes the garages, so that's how we get that, and the EV gets to 274.
If I might as well.
Yes.
Just something that we're not allowed to count. All those garages, not all of them, the ones that are tucked under the building, they all have a driveway on them. So we are not allowed to count that as a parking stall, but that theoretically could be used as parking as well, as a tandem spot.
Okay, I'm glad you pointed, because that, in some other,
Additional 48 spaces.
okay, that helps, certainly. So, am I correct, even if we wanted to add a condition, or we don't mandate, we make recommendations to council that there be more parking spaces, we are at the max, and that max is arrived at a prudent formula?
They are meeting the code's requirement,
The code.
which our parking ratios are typically based on ITE standards. So I think they're pretty sound standards that are used across multiple jurisdictions. You guys could have us look into our parking ratios and compare them with our neighbors to see if we're in line. But yes, we think this is a good standard.
That's what I was going to propose, that, just to move on from the parking, it's that we, before we go to council, look at the ratios there of the existing apartments to this project.
That certainly would be helpful, but when you say move on to councils, that presumes that we don't advance this. I guess what I'm getting at is, number one, we are meeting the code. So now we get into a more subjective area in that, because we're meeting the code, that would certainly be helpful going forward. But if forward doesn't include advancing this proposal tonight, is that, so I'm clear what you're...
It's semantics, I think. It's just, in this case, a no vote, isn't the end all. It still goes on to council for their vote on it, right?
It still goes on to council, yes,
Yeah.
no matter what. Yes, all right, we are putting the cart before the horse here. I suppose it could go on to council with an understanding that council first require a study of, as Logan is suggesting, could be done. Because we are at the limits of the code, and we add 40 spaces, which helpful, I don't know, it completely solves the problem. We can certainly, I presume we can certainly make a recommendation too regarding the parking, the feed, Steve, or whichever, you or Justin, what'd you call it, a feeder street that where there is parking allowed, but it's inside the
Yeah, that's Collector Street.
Collector
but
Street,
that's
yeah,
Stonefly, which is just on the south side.
Yeah.
The other street, there's no parking allowed on that, so it would all have to be contained within the site.
Okay, but the other street, there is parking.
Yes.
Okay. And
Which others are still using it, so I don't think that's a factor. But
Okay.
I think it makes this a little bit more feasible just because of the no parking zones on Kidd.
And there is a police station across the street, so presumably they'd be ticketed relatively quickly.
Hopefully.
And Marty,
Okay.
point of correction,
Logan.
there has been a
If
ticket
I
issued
may.
in Wild Wing.
You may.
For parking.
Oh, good.
One of my
may.
neighbors, yes.
My suggestion was not to penalize this particular application, but to have staff perhaps in the future look at parking ratios for any future projects. I mean, this application did come under our current land use code, and so that's how we are applying it.
I got your drift that we're talking about. That's why I said that, that's why I asked Marty what his inclination was. Are there any, because I think we've covered everything height variance is something to be taken into consideration for sure. Any other comments on this one? Yeah, Michael.
On the other properties, do you charge for parking, which is going to force
Good point.
the conscious people, economically to walk that extra step and
Right.
park on other streets?
So,
Garages, I understand, are premium.
correct. Surface parking, no. There's no charge to surface parking, whether it's in front of a building or across the property. There's no charge there. And there's 165 of those units. There's a total of 95 garages that would come with a price tag each month. There's 47 detached garage structures and then 48 tuck-unders. And those tuck-unders are in the buildings themselves, and those are the ones that have the tandem drives to them. So an additional 48 is what could be used for those residents as well. And then there's 8 handicap and then the 6 EV chargers. So
Is parking assigned, or is it a free-for-all? Okay.
no, we have not in the past, but again, that is more a management decision and how they see fit, property to property. So we talk to them weekly and understand what the needs are for each property, and they have our support most of the time. So, yeah. So
Were the parking spaces designed for a standard pickup truck or for a compact car?
they should be standard all the way through. There's no compact.
I know one of the
spots.
problems they had across the street is a lot of the parking spaces wouldn't fit a Ford F-150 type truck.
Right.
And that's why a lot of people are parking out on the street.
And that makes sense. I believe, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, but everything is standard parking requirements, no compacts.
It may be something to look at because a large number of the population here drive pickup trucks.
Yes, I can confer to that. Yep, back home, that's what we do as well. So
Great, thank you.
And Michael, that was a good thought about the paid. So I guess I got to, it seems to me, I know parking is a big issue with council. I don't know how council views this, this particular project. I feel like we need to, because parking seems to be the biggest issue, and because we are following the code, I don't know, but I don't necessarily think we can put a condition on this, but I do feel like we need to make some recommendation to council that be looked at. At their discretion, I think, at their discretion, it should be their discretion whether or not they hold up advancing this. This is my opinion, whether they hold up advancing this pending staff doing a further study.
Well, I think what we can do, what I'd recommend is, and this doesn't penalize this business item, I think it helps better inform the final decision, is basically before it goes to council is have a comparison, an apples to apples comparison of the existing apartments to this one, just to see how do they compare, taking into account all the spaces there, the garages there, even the street parking over there, just to make an estimate to see how comparable they are. To see if this one actually does have more, a higher ratio of spots versus over there. That makes sense?
So I think so. Staff, when would this, do you know when this is going to council?
This is going to council next Tuesday. So is that an analysis you would want staff to do, or the applicant?
We would want staff to do that.
They're not going to know the project, the existing apartments. I just know with the existing issues, I can't imagine that they would let this pass. I mean, we're hearing this and we still have a question on it. And so they're gonna, I would imagine as well.
Okay, so I'm clear. Can you repeat what you would like us to do?
So comparison of ratios of parking of the existing apartments and this project, taking into account, the spots that we talked about on the new project here, but also, on the existing apartments, what the parking spaces are, and, I don't know if we have to take into account the street as well, because they have the street to park on there and not very many spots here.
I certainly think we can look at the site plan and see how many spaces were provided, what the ratio is. But in terms of utilization, maybe Steve or Justin can speak to this. I think you have to do kind of a observation over time.
I wasn't suggesting utilization.
Okay.
I was just, what is the ratio of available spots compared to both?
To okay. Okay. I think that's a pretty easy ask. We can do that.
Logan, I'm just curious, if council wants to mandate that there needs to be more parking spaces, can they do that?
I don't believe they can. If they're meeting the code, I don't think there's grounds for council to require anything above. They could certainly ask, but I would believe it'd be difficult for them to require that.
I would think so too. You can't change the code retroactively. No. Yeah. I'm not comfortable with this, and I'm also not inclined to necessarily say I don't want to just per se kick the can down the road. So I think yours, Marty, is certainly that we tie that in going forward. As to the height variance, commissioners, I want to ask a question.
Can we speak to that really quick too?
What's that?
Sorry to interrupt. We're not, just to clarify, we're not asking for a height variance. So what it has to do with is actually how the building is measured. Height is measured, which is from, if you want to jump in there, and I think Logan was probably looking at that, but height's measured from the eave to the top, and it's the midpoint of the roof there, which is where you get that.
Staff.
Right. Let them jump in.
Yeah, so we'll want to look at it, but it's measured from the average of finished grade at the center of all walls of the building to the top of the parapet or the highest roof beam. So we'll look at that again.
Okay, well, what we're hearing, thanks. What we're hearing is that we don't know. And I know there's some confusion. There's been confusion about how it's measured in the past with some other things that been precedes this planning staff. I'd like to hear a suggestion for, because I wouldn't be comfortable advancing this strictly as it is. I think some recommendation, I think it has to include that even though there's only a week's time, that staff is going to study the parking per Marty's suggestion, which Logan indicated. Yes.
In terms of the height as well, there is an exception in the land use code that allows for added height up to 15%. So if it were not under the allowable height, we could ask, that could be a request to council next week. So
That's what I understand. Marty already mentioned that. It appears to exceed the variance, the automatic, exceed the 15%, correct?
Well, based on the dimensions I saw, but it's one of those where we need to clarify that. And in the land use code specifically, it says 35 feet with the 15%. It specifically says council has to approve that, not planning commission.
Okay, good.
So we have to clarify the existing height because the drawings were a bit unclear to me that said they were over. But so we have to clarify that, clarify the already approved variance that was back in January 9th, 2018.
Chad just suggested that that might have been the case. We would have to look back at those files. But the PD overlay, the maximum height for the PD overlay is 40 feet. So it's an additional 5.
Okay, so I'd still like clarify what the January 2018 and what the true height is and how does that compare to the code?
Okay, so let me see if I can craft if there's any further discussion, we're getting.
Yeah, I think, just Phil, just a comment. You know, it sounds like we have a project that meets the code, even though there's some things about the project, gosh, I wish it was a senior housing. I wish it wasn't as high density. I wish it was more conservatively designed for stormwater. I wish it had more parking, but it does meet the codes. And as a commissioner, it's hard for us to say no to something that meets the code, but we can certainly pass on our comments to City Council saying, yes, we would approve it because it meets the code, but gosh, it's pushing some of the boundaries of what we really feel comfortable with in some areas. And I think that's the message we should pass on as a commission to City Council, that yes, we approve it because it meets the code. On the other side, there's some gray things about it that I wish were different.
That's well said. That's exactly where I was headed. This, I would have, when I first saw this, I thought I would have approved this, absent of any other consideration. Certainly, I would have approved this back when it started in January of 2018. Certainly would have approved it. Would have wanted some of these things addressed, including parking, because we were already under the gun with parking. So with that, I would suggest, and I'm not adept at putting this into a motion, but I think you get the gist of this, that this goes forward to council with Planning Commission noting that because it meets the code on parking, and there does not appear to be any other recourse that is within, correct me if I'm wrong, falls within Planning Commission purview, we want council to know that we addressed this issue. We've noted those things, and we also, and it wouldn't be right to say, we understand that we may not be able to do anything about it, but we did note those things, but it does meet the code on the parking.
Yeah.
And then, in addition, you can note, and I heard you say you think you can get the required information per Marty's suggestion, which was a good one, and that we requested that information, and whatever the findings are of that then may be presented to them at their meeting. And then as for the height variance, you can also note that we had a question about it. Staff was still looking into it, but we understand that is solely within their purview, and if a variance was already approved, that may be so be it. If not, that is within their purview.
I guess I would say clarify the previous variance approval and clarify the height of the building compared to the code. So clarify those two things before it goes so they can make an informed decision.
I agree with that. And I think hopefully the applicant as well as staff has heard some of our concerns. And you've got a week or so before this is going to come before City Council. Think about what your response might be, because staff is certainly going to be watching over your shoulders to make sure that this is a project that we as a town are going to be happy with at the end of the day. And you want to make sure it's a success too.
I have a feeling, because we started doing this, much to my surprise, at a previous meeting, the mayor will bring me up to the podium and ask for clarification coming out of.
You're really good at that.
Well, were you there?
I wasn't.
Okay. Yeah, well, I get it. So, all right, I think you have enough information. Our attorney's not here who's expert at putting that into a motion, but I think you get what we're trying to do. Okay, with that, I suppose the motion is to advance it with the further recommendation addendums, if you will, as presented jointly here. So do I have a motion on this your business item 6A?
Motion to approve item 6A with the conditions noted.
Second.
Okay, discussion, further discussion. Hearing none, okay. I'm following Bob's rules of order now. All right, all in favor of item 6A, Trailside Multifamily Site Plan as just presented? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries on a 5-0 vote. Thanks, fellows. Business item 7A, Timnath Shores Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Logan.
Okay. The Timnath Shores Comprehensive Plan Amendment seeks to amend the future land use map for a 76-acre parcel currently designated as rural residential. The subject property is located approximately 1/2 mile east of County Road 5 at the southeast corner of Larimer County Road 3E and County Road 42E. So again, this is consideration of a comprehensive plan amendment, which is required if a development proposal substantially conflicts with the comprehensive plan. Staff used the criteria in 2964 of the Land Use Code to review the proposal. Public notice was provided in accordance with the Land Use Code, and a neighborhood meeting was held on June 20th, 2024. The request is to change 51 of the 76 acres from rural residential to low-density residential while maintaining the remaining 25 acres of rural residential. So here you can see those side by side, the current land use on the left and then the proposal on the right. Rural residential is characterized by larger lot development that is integrated with open spaces and offers fewer streetlights, street networks, and sidewalks. Low-density residential is characterized by single-family neighborhoods that include parks, trails, and neighborhood amenities. This table illustrates the result of the proposal as it relates to the property's density. Essentially, the requested change would permit an additional 153 units beyond the current allowable limit. Staff finds that the proposal generally appears to be consistent with the applicable goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan, and we are seeking guidance from you all on whether to forward a recommendation of approval, denial, or approval with conditions to Town Council. And with that, I'll pass it off to JR Engineering.
Thank you, Logan. My name is Ken Merritt with JR Planners, Engineers, Landscape Architects, representing the applicant this evening, Cottonwood Development Partners. Here, joining me as well this evening is Jim Ringheimer with Cottonwood Partners that would like to make a couple of opening comments before I do my presentation, if you would. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good seeing you again here. I'm Jim Righeimer. I'm the developer who took over the Saratoga Falls Broken project, and with a lot of staff here over the last few years, got the second filing done, and now we're on the third filing. But just off the top of it, we're looking to do something different here than what the comp plan has, because we can't move anything forward based on all the needs to make the project work. We're the ones who took Prospect Road and literally took it down 36 inches, brought in, base, curved it around so Dead Man's Lake was taken care of. It was a big, heavy lift. We know what it takes when you have massive infrastructure, that doing projects like, oh, let's just do 1 acre projects, there's a reason why they just never get built. And he'll go through it, Ken will go through it, and I'll speak later to it. But there's just a lot to try to make this math work in any way, shape, or form to move forward. Otherwise, it just stays. And so we're just trying to find a way to make it work. And I think we found a good balance with keeping a big chunk of it along the lake at the much higher density, but to be able to go ahead and have enough roof count at all to bring in, as he's going to go over, Ken's going to go over, the massive amount of additional miles of road and everything else that are arterial to make that part of town work. So I'll come up later and talk about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Jim. Thank you, Logan, for your introduction. I appreciate. So Logan introduced the project nicely. I just want to point out a couple of things. County Road 42E is on the north of the property. Access, we're about a half mile east of County Road 5. And you also notice that the Wild Wing subdivision to the east of us, Wild Wing Drive actually ends about a quarter mile east of our development. We'll talk more about that a little bit. And very importantly, this project borders on a large area of the Timnath Reservoir shoreline, approximately 2,400 feet, and we want to discuss that as well in this presentation. As Logan pointed out, on the left is the town's current future land use master plan. Shown in a heavy red dashed line is the general area that we're looking at today. It's fairly centrally located within the growth management area of Timnath. On the right is the actual property itself. One of the things I want to point out with this slide is the adjacent designations of various land uses that surround this property, so that as we move through this presentation, there's some context to what we're going to be discussing. The property is 76 acres, and it is designated rural residential. Property to the north, as well as to the east of the property, is all designated low-density residential on the city's future land use master plan. The areas shown in tan, very light tan on this image, are those properties that are currently designated are rural residential in the town. Taking a closer look at the actual proposal before you this evening is to modify, of the 76 acres, modify 51 acres from rural residential to low-density residential. And what that basically means is taking a property that would need to comport with the estate residential zone district if it were annexed and zoned, that has a maximum density of 1 unit per acre, and allowing 4 units per acre, up to 4 units per acre, to be developed within the area shown in yellow, outlined in red. And Jim mentioned the balance that we're trying to strike. We understand the benefit and the value of this high-value natural resource of Timnath Reservoir, and the need to keep the shoreline much less dense and within the context of the original RR designation. So we are leaving 25 acres as rural residential. What that means as it would relate to actual zoning, if we were to annex the property, is that rural residential would have, that area of 25 acres, would have a maximum density of 1 unit per acre and would be limited to half-acre lots, which are actually similar to those lots on the east side of Timnath Reservoir along the lake edge itself. So in order to sort of describe a little bit more specifically the context of this development, I took an aerial photo of the general area, blew it up, and what I want to do is talk about the surrounding property and its compatibility with other land use designations within close proximity and directly adjacent to this site. What you'll notice here, outlined in red, is our property. We show the proposed amendment of the 51 acres, and I want to point to you along the eastern edge and southern edge of the property, we have 2,400 lineal feet of reservoir shoreline. We'll talk about more about that in a little bit. And our goal and focus to protect and enhance that shoreline, which is very different than what has occurred in the Wild Wing development. But to our northwest, north, and east of us, you'll notice that all that property is designated as low-density residential on the land use chart. The Wild Wing development was designated low-density residential, but obviously was annexed and zoned and developed. And the corresponding zoning classification for that property was R2. North of Prospect Road is Saratoga Falls which Jim mentioned he's been involved with in finishing that project out over the last several years. That property as well was zoned low-density residential and was zoned R2 when it was annexed and zoned. Property directly west of us and northwest of us, I think it's important to understand why that likely been designated RR, rural residential. And that's because those properties were already subdivided in the county as a state residential property. So if you look at the property to the northwest of our site, designated RR, you can see that there are already state residential homes that were already fully developed in that development. And so the RR designated made sense because it was existing land use that existed. Property directly west of us has also been subdivided in the county into a series of residential lots. There are 3 state residential lots as well as 1 larger lot. And as you cross west of the ditch, which is on the western third of the property, if you would, there are 2 state residential parcels that have been created there. However, if you look at County Road 5, that area of County Road 5, east of County Road 5, is designated LDR, low-density residential, although it's not currently developed. That's our corn maze, the Timnath corn maze that everyone's familiar with. And then to the west of County Road 5 is the Fisher subdivision, which was recently annexed and zoned R2. 2 was zoned or designated LDR at one time, and a couple of years ago was annexed and zoned. And then in the area to the far west, it's actually probably one of the most recent significant land use amendments that took place, and it's shown in that purple color. It was residential, low-density residential, and it was amended to be ERC, which is employment retail commercial use. So any land use modification needs to be grounded on a strong foundation of meeting the requirements, the goals and objectives of the town's comprehensive master plan. And as you're well aware, the town's comprehensive master plan is organized around 6 central themes. Now, in your package, I provided you a fairly lengthy narrative of those goals and objectives within the town's comprehensive master plans and which ones were applicable to this particular project. And then I provided you the actions that we believe this property, if it were to be amended, would take to accomplish those goals and objectives. So it's the action portion of that narrative that I provided you that actually describe what our vision for the property is and how it will achieve those goals and objectives. And in a land use modification like this, I think it's important that we don't ask for a land use modification that simply meets the same goals and objectives that would have been accomplished with the current designation, but go far beyond what could be accomplished under the current land use designation that exists. That's an important characteristic of your decision tonight, I believe, and I think in our narrative we've helped to describe how we believe we would exceed those goals and objectives that the current RR designation would achieve. So there are 6 central themes in the comprehensive master plan, and 4 are directly applicable to this property. That don't mean to undermine those 2 that don't, but item number 2, theme number 2, and unparalleled Old Town. Our Old Town is wonderful. The Timnath Old Town is wonderful. It's going to go through a real renaissance here with changes that are going to be happening over the next decade. It's not that this development and the people that live in this development won't benefit from its proximity of only a mile and a half from Old Town, and they will obviously utilize those goods and services. But we didn't feel as though there was any direct contribution that this land use modification would actually make, other than bringing additional additional population to the downtown, which will be beneficial. And then number 6 is support of small town economy. Obviously, this property, if it were developed, if it were approved and subsequently developed, will have an economic impact. The people that live here will utilize the goods and services of the town, most likely. And additionally, during the horizontal and vertical development, there'll be tremendous economic benefit to the town as well. But again, we didn't make any claims of direct goals and objectives to be accomplished there. The ones that are, I want to take a moment to go through, and I'm sure that you've read what we prepared, but I want to go through some of the highlights of those goals and objectives that we believe are going to be accomplished. The goals and objectives are identified in yellow, and our action items are shown in white. A first-rate small town, and the goal is the quality of the amenities and the infrastructure investments being made on this property. And we believe that Timnath Shores will have an extensive on-site pedestrian trail system, which includes pocket parks, extensive open space, and it will develop over a half a mile of the town's regional trail system if it were to be approved. Open country feel and parks and natural area. The intent or the goal there is to really celebrate the natural assets of the development and provide a balanced system of parks and trails, and to recognize those natural amenities and really celebrate those within the community. And we plan on doing that as well. So one way that we're going to do this, and this goes back to that 2,400 lineal feet of shoreline that I mentioned to you, that we border the western shoreline of Timnath Reservoir, is we plan on providing a 50 to 75 foot wide natural area, natural habitat buffer zone to preserve the natural shoreline habitat of the Timnath Reservoir, and provide this will provide an improved wildlife habitat for the shoreline, as well as it will be connected with pocket parks, community amenities, and extensions of the town's regional trail system. Number 4, the regionally connected and locally enhanced multimodal system, a well-balanced, safe, and efficient transportation system. And Jim alluded to this a little while ago when he talked about, and we'll get into more detail, there is a significant amount of infrastructure development that is actually going to benefit the town and make this property a reality. There are extensive roadway improvements that need to be made, both the County Road 42E, which is a half a mile of off-site roadway improvements, and if you're familiar with 42E, currently a dirt road. And so we will be improving that. We'll get into the detail of what we believe Timnath Shores would need to do upon development. There are some improvements to County Road 42 as well, and County Road 3E, which is directly adjacent to our western boundary line, that too will need to be fully improved. And then there's a large network of off-site pedestrian bike trails that exist within the development, the extension of the regional trail system, and some off-street bike trails as well for those individuals, those younger individuals that don't want to be on the on-street bike lanes that will exist. And then finally, and this is probably the most important, in my belief, the most important criteria in the comprehensive master plan, and the one item that I think is most achieved and is not achieved whatsoever with the current RR's designation, and that's a neighborly cohesive community, a mix of housing. The goal here is to provide a mix of housing and is available to support a variety of household compositions and income levels. Well, in the RR zone district, it offers opportunities to a very small group of very small economic demographic. It's half-acre lots, estate lots, and you can all have in your mind what an estate lot might mean with regards to cost, but that's all that can occur on this property is 76 single-family detached estate lots on lots that are at least a half acre in size. Changing 51 acres of this property from RR to LDR will accomplish is diversity in single-family housing types, detached housing types, and lot sizes ranging from approximately 6,000 square foot, which is the minimum lot size, in the corresponding R2 district, which corresponds to the LD, low-density residential, to half-acre lots, which will ensure home ownership opportunities to a much broader range of incomes and households. And we believe that this is really what is being asked for in the town of Timnath, not just an exclusive neighborhood of estate-style lots. So now I just want to sort of punctuate some of the things Jim was saying with regards to the massive amount of not just on-site infrastructure, but off-site infrastructure that has to be developed in order to make this property a reality. And as Jim mentioned, the only way to do that is by introducing a little bit higher density. Now, we're talking about higher density. It's still low density, but it is a little bit higher density than what is allowed as 1 unit per acre under the RR district. So there is about a mile, looking first at the water and sewer infrastructure, we have a half mile of off-site water that has to be brought in from County Road 5 to the western edge of our property and then brought through our property. Additionally, on the bottom of the screen, shown in orange, is a sanitary sewer interceptor line that Box Elder Sanitation District wants to bring across County Road 42, turn that to the north, and then run along our southern and eastern boundary line. Likely that would be within the 50 to 75 foot natural area buffer, but obviously it's below ground. And so there are only a few surface appurtenances involved with that. But what that would do is open up all that LDR property north and east of us to a sewer outfall that would extend through our development and head further to the west. Additionally, there may be an opportunity for the Wild Wing development to connect into this sewer outfall as well, and perhaps even decommission some of the existing lift stations that exist within the Wild Wing development. Taking a look at the roadway infrastructure, and this, again, is primarily off-site infrastructure or directly adjacent infrastructure, and that is, once again, a half mile of interim major collector road from County Road 5 to our western boundary line. And as you probably are well aware, County Road 42E is a dirt road right now. And so that would need to be improved to a rural arterial, major arterial standard. When it enters our site on the west and to our eastern boundary line, that would be a full major collector, which would include through lanes, center turn lane, bike lanes, curb and gutter, and pedestrian walkways. And then along our western border, County Road, what's currently called County Road 3, obviously, if it's annexed and zoned, it'll get actually named. All these roads will, excuse me. That is a minor collector road, and that road will have to be fully developed as well because it does not function adequately to serve this development. So it would be a minor collector road standard, probably built in an interim fashion where the west side would be interim with just an edge of asphalt. There would be two through lane in each direction, a bike lane on the east side, a curb and gutter, a tree lawn, and we're proposing an 8-foot pedestrian walkway and a 50-foot landscape buffer along that along County Road 3E to the residential lots. Additionally, if you take a look from the Wild Wing development, Wild Wing Drive, it ends currently, and there's a turnaround at the very east-westerly end of that development. Eventually, when the property to the north develops, there would be an opportunity to connect Wild Wing Drive where it terminates at its western point and connect to our eastern portion of Wild Wing Drive, if that's what we call it, as well, which would provide connectivity all the way from Lansing Parkway to County Road 5 and direct access to Timnath Old Town. So we want to talk a little bit about the natural area, natural habitat buffer zone that I discussed earlier. You'll see this green edge along the RR designated area. We're committed to providing a 50 to 75 foot natural habitat buffer zone along the shoreline, which is approximately 2,400 lineal feet, and extend that a full 3,400 along the entire perimeter boundary of the RR designated property. And as you can see, the Wild Wing development to the east, many of those homes that border the lakeshore are actually platted right to the lakeshore, and there's a limited amount of environmental buffer that exists. We believe that this natural habitat buffer zone, as well as the enhancement that will take place within that as part of this development, will only improve the natural habitat of the Timnath Reservoir and be an asset not only to this development, but as well as to the town. And remember, likely through, currently, the town's regional trail system ends along the, at that midpoint where it's sort of, there's kind of a V at the southern boundary of the property. It ends at approximately that location, and we will be extending the town's regional trail all along within that natural habitat buffer zone, all the way to County Road 42 or Wild Wing Drive, whatever it ends up being called. So that ends my presentation. I appreciate you allowing me to take a little extra time. Cottonwood Development Partners, as well as myself, thank you in advance for your consideration tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and I'm sure Jim would be happy to do so as well.
Thanks, Ken. Anybody lined up for public comment?
There is no one signed up for.
All right, is there anybody else who does wish to speak? All right, Ken, we'll bring you back up here in a minute. You know the drill. Yes, sir, if you'd like to come up and state your name and address, you may have 3 minutes.
Better check my notes to remember what my name is. My name's Ryan Ferdig. Right now I'm renting at 5520 Long Drive in Timnath. But we purchased the last 2.3 acre lot just to the west of the proposed development. I guess I'm one of those privileged people. I wanted to read something that we wrote at the time of our purchase, 2022, that sort of froze in time what we valued about the property, and I think it's important as we discuss value to the town, value to the developer, value to the community. These experts demonstrate what we valued. This property is a dream my wife and I have clung to for more than 15 years. To us, those mountain peaks, which we can see from the west, aren't a view to be sold, but a creation to inspire our kids every morning over breakfast. That peace and quiet isn't just something to mention at the bottom of a list, but rather the environment that will allow our kids to hear their own thoughts. The space isn't just square footage to be assessed, but the frontier that our kids can explore, hopefully encouraging them to resist the pull of a lifetime of curated existence. It's a place for my girl's first dog, my son to document new discoveries in his field notebook, for my youngest to run around without worrying about a neighborhood of cars whizzing by, and to enjoy tranquility in a world increasingly chaotic. I just want to clarify a few things. First of all, I have no ill will towards the developer. He exhibited a great deal of skill and persistence in acquiring the property and bringing it to this point, and has every right to profit from it. In accordance with the law, I thank him for his efforts to make the development palatable to the neighbors and for his outreach. And he seems like a good guy, and I'd welcome him as a neighbor. I'm not asking for no development at all in this area. I'd prefer a vacant cornfield, wouldn't we all? But we knew the land was zoned for future development of the 1 acre lots residential when we bought it. I understand there's opportunity for economic benefit for the developer, for future developers in the area who would have less cost bringing water and sewer and infrastructure into the area for the town who had more property tax paying houses annexed into the town. However, I just ask that the commission consider, in order to deliver that economic benefit to these other parties, you have to diminish the value that I have on my property. While the development of the property in accordance with the adopted future use doesn't perhaps optimize the immediate economic value of the town, I hope you'll agree there's substantial value in a neighborhood where you can hear your thoughts. There's a reason why the town originally designated
If you
the
could
property.
wrap it up, or you can wrap it up soon.
Yes,
Very
this is
good,
the-
thanks.
Originally designated the property rural residential, and for my part, I just ask that the commission exercise the wisdom, foresight, and patience to allow use to develop when it's ready and deny this request to rezone. And I'll just further say that the principles of a first-rate small town and open country are perfectly satisfied with a rural residential zoning. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to Planning Commission? Okay, now close public comment. Yes?
Can I speak?
Yes, ma'am. 3 minutes, please. State your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Myrna Hanson. My address is 2635 South County Road 3E. We moved out there in the 90s, and it has been my understanding, and I think I have property with the assessor, that County Road 42, although it is an extension of Drake, that goes right through my property because I am at the dead end of County Road 3. There's 3 little houses there. There is nowhere to put a road, for a public road, to go through my property to get through 42. So I'm very concerned about that, and I echo the sentiments of the gentleman that just spoke as far as why we live out there and the type of life that we value. And this is not conducive to that. And like I said, we'll be looking into the 42, County Road 42, and the 3 extension, because that blew me away. And if it wasn't for my neighbor, Dan Griffith, I never would have even known about this because I was not notified at all. And I don't know if it's because I have a Fort Collins address. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for your time. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, sir. You need to come up. You need to please come up here and state your name and address in 3 minutes.
Brian Ring, 2301 South County Road 3E. I live in one of those houses that's already developed on 3E. I was going to say something. I repeat what he says, exactly word for word. He really nailed it. That's it.
Thank
Sorry.
you. Anybody else? Signed up or otherwise? Okay. Thank you. All right, we now close public comment. The issue of the road, staff, any thoughts on this? I don't entirely understand. Steve, looks like you have some thoughts.
Certainly. I assume you're talking about Ms. Hanson's comment about County
Yes.
Road? Okay, yes. So there is a very slim right-of-way, I believe, just north of her property. She is absolutely correct. It is not the full right-of-way width. This County Road 3 is a gravel road. The bridge across the Timnath Reservoir Inlet Canal right there isn't even safe for vehicles to go across. I really didn't even want to walk across it. What we've discussed with the developer is that a new crossing is likely to be necessary. The improvements to 42E are likely going to be necessary because of multiple points of access, all of which is to be determined when we get into preliminary design. There will be some right-of-way north of that that would make more sense to purchase to get the connection to work. But again, none of this has been really looked at from an engineering standpoint, and we're just at concept review right now. But the intent would be to ferret all of this out as the project moves forward.
Steve, do I understand, and Ken certainly, this relates to the extension out of Wild Wing to this? Just briefly, just tell me, because as I said, when I asked this question, I didn't understand the issue entirely. This relates not west, but going east, if it ever comes to fruition.
I believe the concern was County Road 42, which is the southern road.
Yes.
Not County Road 42E, which is the one that would extend across to Wild Wing.
Logan, would you mind loading that? Yeah, and I probably, in the interest of time, and I may have just skipped over a few things, should have maybe punctuated a little bit further. County Road 42E is on the south of our property. It too is a dirt road currently. It's road-based road. 42, what did I say? E, I apologize. I'm just further confusing the issue. 42, County Road 42, south of our property, is a road-based road right now. It's important to point out, and the lady that spoke just moments ago is somewhat correct in that there is actually a 60-foot right-of-way that does exist for 42, County Road 42. But it only goes to the ditch, the westerly. You can see in this image, there's a ditch along the that runs on the west side of the property. It ends at that point. And then as it crosses over that ditch, there is a 30-foot right-of-way that does exist today. Now, in order to make that, the intent of any improvements on 42 was for secondary emergency vehicle access only, and that's the point I really missed, that we're not going to improve that road. That would be only a secondary point of access, so there would have to be some improvements to make sure that the road has a carrying capacity of 40,000 pounds, and there would actually need to be 2 irrigation ditch culverts that would have to be built in order to provide safe transport across those ditches that would then loop in from the south. But County Road 3E has right-of-way that goes all the way to the eastern edge of that first easterly ditch, and then there is a 60-foot right-of-way that goes from County Road 5 to the westerly edge, of the westerly ditch, and then there's a 30-foot right-of-way that continues beyond that. So it is not going to be a road that is used to access this development until such time that development to the north on the property that is identified as LDR were to develop. And so, because that would be at a subdivision, at a low-density residential level, and obviously they would need to make improvements to that. There may be easements and right-of-way that we have to accomplish to make the secondary point of access work properly, but as Mr. Human pointed out, this is something that will be vetted out during the sketch plan. The next step of this project is annexation and zoning and sketch plan, and we'll vet out some of that during the sketch plan stage, and then eventually at preliminary plat stage, that'll be fully vetted out accordingly. So, so 42, just 42 is an emergency vehicle access only.
So I guess the overarching question is this catching us unawares during the initial phase of the discussions with planners? And Steve, for you, does that, I put it in real simple terms, does that, because it doesn't sound like we necessarily, this could advance until this issue, and when I'm hearing, well, it'll be vetted later, is this a problem given Ken's clarification, which is helpful certainly?
No, either the developer can make this happen or the project cannot move forward. Their decision, well, it's not the wrong decision, but the decision to wait till they have more information to fully determine what can and cannot be done, it's too premature at this point to put that kind of time and effort into that type of thing.
Is this access road, again, I believe I understand the necessity of having the second access. That is a requirement, correct? I've seen this become an issue elsewhere after the fact in some cases.
That's correct, and that's why we are all focused on it this early without actually knowing whether or not it can be done. I believe it can be, as Ken said. Emergency access, there is a 30-foot right-of-way existing, not the full 60-foot right-of-way. There is 2 ditch crossings that need to be improved to carry emergency apparatus. And that is, I believe, what the developer was referring to early on as far as the extensive offsite expenses to develop this piece of property in the first place.
All right, I got some colleagues that are a lot smarter than me. Is anybody else seeing this in the same light? Marty?
Well, I think it's like what we saw before. I mean, you know, like you said, it can't proceed until that's resolved, right? So
it would appear as such.
So you know,
It's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
it is. Well, I don't know that it's even that. I mean, even if that's metaphor.
Well, I think that they do need to look at some of these zoning kind of questions that they've brought up today. And once they've got that going, then they can decide if they can build a road or not. But there's some things here that are clearly
Let me make one comment.
stumbling blocks or red flags before you're all done to build something.
Let me make very clear. County 42 is in a 60-foot right-of-way, and the right-of-way goes all the way to the western edge of the easterly ditch as 30 foot of right-of-way. We're looking to be able to do an emergency vehicle access. So improvements to the road would need to be done within that 60-foot right-of-way on the road-based road that exists in order to demonstrate to Valley Fire that it can hold an emergency vehicle. The 30-foot right-of-way which exists across the property of the young lady that talked a moment ago, that's public right-of-way. It exists. We've done our due diligence and know that exists. County Road 3E exists to the ditch itself. Now, we do need easements to cross the ditch and approval to cross the ditch. But as far as whether we can do a 20-foot wide access drive for emergency vehicles, there's no question that could happen within the 60-foot of right-of-way that exists today, as well as the 30-foot of right-of-way that exists in the last several hundred feet before we cross the ditch. Jim, did you want to make a couple of comments as well?
I think one of the items is kind of look at back up from where we're at. Notice, you know, my previous life, I sat up at the dais. I was a planning commissioner. I was a city councilman and a mayor. And notice staff is not coming in because this is a policy decision. What we do know from the development side of it is it's not developable as 1-acre parcels. There's just no way the infrastructure will work. So what the previous developers have done, and they didn't get to you, but I've seen their plans, is, you know, high density throughout the project, make it all, you know, LDR, put a townhome project on the water, everything to try to figure out what to make it happen. Yeah, I've been doing this way too long, and I'm not interested in doing that game. They would come in and just say, we just want to have it, you know, 40 the acre up to the water, and then we'll come back later and take it out and put the acre lots on there. Just don't want to go on that road. We just want to do what it's going to take financially to move forward. In order to move forward, you guys have to make a recommendation to the council, and the council then will, you know, decide what to change the comp plan. And it's a policy decision. It's not something staff can come back with. And so I've got 3 neighbors, actually a 4th now. I just met her. There's 3 people on that road over there. I've been working with them to do it. You know, the first thing I came in with was the road that there are 3 houses are on. There's 3 lots that were taken out of that 40 acres. And Daniel, was it 40 acres the rest? Yeah. So he bought the original piece it all is cut out of. He bought that recently. And so, and then he maybe can do something to put larger lots there. If he annexes into the town, obviously he'd have to follow the town rules, and he knows that. But I've got 3 neighbors there that I want to do right by because, you know, they've got these phenomenal, it comes up a hill right there. They're at the peak of it. And they got beautiful mountain views, and they've got nice houses, and Ryan's going to build a nice house there. So I'm looking at everything that I can do to like buffer it, back it up, whatever. Put the big nice houses just like Wild Wing did around the water area. If you notice, Wild Wing, bigger ones are on the water, and they get denser as they go back. We're not looking to get anywhere near dense Wild Wing in any way, shape, or form. But we do have to cover all the costs of getting the infrastructure, and that's sewer lines, water lines, and all those are needed. If you actually look at how that property is, that's the kingpin for all this development happening. Fisher has been approved for how long? You guys approved it. Steve, how long ago was Fisher? A year ago? 2 years ago?
I'm not sure that's pertinent, Jim.
Okay, but
go ahead, please.
My point is waiting for us to see if we can get the water to them because they need 2 points of connection. There's all sorts of pieces that have to come in. So again, we need to go here to say, would you allow us to go ahead and take 51 acres, make it the 4 to the acre, up to 4 to the acre? It really comes out to about 3.5 to the acre by the time you do all the buffering. Can we do that? And if go to the council, they agree to, then we come back with the next step of saying, okay, we got that. Now we're going to go ahead and say, what are all the things that we have to do? We've got a pretty big list of off-site costs, just massive off-site costs. And we think that that number will back in and work. We're not trying to negotiate it or, you know, try this number and come back later. We're just trying to tell you what we think works and go from there.
Colleagues, tell me if I'm overreacting. I'm hearing that there's some things that have to be figured out. Am I correct, Tom?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly things that be figured out.
I'm not, my initial and continuing reaction is this is a can we're not kicking on down the road to council saying, okay, we approve this. Now you decide if it's acceptable to approve it through you all. So I do feel these things need to be vetted. I'm not saying anything is insurmountable. It doesn't sound like it is. Certainly from what our town engineer indicated, these things are surmountable. But I think it needs to be done and then brought back to us.
Well, that would require, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, that would require that we either go through the sketch plan stage, which is the next step prior to annexation zoning, or go through the preliminary plat stage. We've had a concept review meeting with staff where Mr. Human and others, planning department, pointed out those critical factors, and we feel like we have addressed those and believe they can be addressed. I guess I'm not sure. Can 42E be built? Yes, it certainly can. The right-of-way exists. Can the water line be brought in along 42E on the north? Yes, it can. We've already talked with Elko Water District. Can the sewer be extended where I showed it along 42 and cross the ditch? These are engineering issues, not land use issues. The right-of-way exists. About the only thing that doesn't exist, and I'll be frank here, is that, you know, as part of the preliminary plat stage, we'll have to get approval to cross 2 ditches that are south and west of this development. The right-of-way exists. County Road 3 right-of-way exists. We can rebuild County Road 3 in today. We're going to dedicate more right-of-way. In fact, it's a very dangerous road. We're going to actually help to straighten it out a little bit because if you notice, it has a number. Logan, if you wouldn't mind pulling that up, Ms. Graves, I'd appreciate that. But it has zigzags in it. I realize that's a technical term. And we're looking to actually straighten that out, which is actually going to take property away from the Timnath shores because we will get rid of those 2 turns and probably make it just, or 3 turns and probably just make it 2. These are all things that we're confident can happen, and if they can't happen, as Mr. Human pointed out, the project wouldn't be able to go forward. If it can't meet the mustard at the sketch plan or preliminary plat stage. The underlying, going any further with this development without some surety that it could be redesignated LDR would be spending good money after bad. We need to know that we can develop, as Mr. Reinheimer had pointed out, it's really about 3.5 units per acre overall over the whole 76 acres, maybe a little bit less than that, I believe. But we know that the technical issues can be resolved, and that'll be vetted out during the preliminary plat, so just like any project that we bring forward to you. We have to be able to demonstrate, the devil's in the details, we understand that, but the underpinning of the whole process moving forward has to do with being able to modify the town's land use plan that would allow us to move forward to do those details and come back to you with either a sketch plan or a preliminary plat that demonstrates that it can be accomplished.
Ken, we're not, somebody help me here. We're not saying this can't be rezoned. We're saying this can't move, this couldn't move forward, but there seem to be substantive issues that need to be addressed. And I think we're doing the proper service to the charge we have from council and the town.
If I may.
And let me finish. Okay. And a resident came up here and presented something that, as I said, I asked the question, was this a late to the game thing? I think it wasn't necessarily, but it certainly seems to have raised issues for us that would cause me to think it's difficult for us to advance this. We very well may, it'll come back before us and we can. Logan?
Yeah, all these issues and considerations will be fully vetted. This is not the stage at which that will happen. So it will happen at the sketch plan phase, at the platting phase. So the question before you today is the proposed amendment compatible with existing and planned surrounding land uses? That's the question you need to answer. And you have your review criteria. Everything else will be vetted later.
When is this anticipated to go to council?
September 10th.
Yeah, I guess my feeling, Phil, on this, I understand the different stages of the way this progresses. Out there, this is beautiful property, and it's great.
I agree.
But, I would much rather see it LDR than R2 or some higher density, which potentially it could be. So when what he's described as having a relatively low density, having a trail, she had me by just saying the trail. I thought that was a good idea. That's a whole lot better than something else. So I think that given our options, this is a better option than what somebody else might provide, recognizing they have to go through a lot of details before they're done. And they can't, I don't think, economically put this off. They don't want to spend a whole lot of money on engineers because this guy's expensive. You don't want to spend a whole lot more money without having some assurance that the town will okay it.
I agree with everything. Now help me formulate what, if anything, should be going forward to council.
So I guess the applicant is asking for the ability to amend our comprehensive plan to redescribe this property from rural residential to low-density residential. Correct?
Yeah, that's our charge.
Correct.
That's
so
all.
that
and
would be something that we could evaluate and say yes or no on. I mean, that's kind of
Can
what
we,
our job is.
staff, can we move this forward under what is our charge solely with the condition to council, or however we have to phrase it, such that they're very much aware of these issues. Steve, you will certainly present that information. I guess let me ask it as a question. If we advance this, you feel comfortable that you can explain, and certainly far better than I can, what these issues were that were raised tonight?
Yes.
And what needs to be done such that then council can understand we've done our due diligence in bringing these things to the forefront, and we certainly appreciate the residents who spoke about that, such that this will catch their attention and they will then help ensure that when it gets to those next stages that these things have been fully vetted.
Absolutely, and staff itself will certainly be that policing agent as well.
I'm comfortable. I'm very much aware from all these years of experience, very much aware what is within our purview or our charge in this case. Mike, you see the, comfortable with that? Michael? Tom, are you comfortable? Wendy, I know you're, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
So let's get more simple here. So the reason why, in real down dumb terms, that you want to do RR to LDR because it's not economically feasible for the developer to develop it as RR. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, actually, correct. Let me just explain. We actually worked on behalf of two other prospective developers on this property that recognized that not only was land use designation amendment needed, but they tried to do it based on the maximum 76 lots on 76 acres at one dwelling unit per acre and a minimum lot size of half acre. And given the fire department requires 2 points of water servicing the property for fire protection. Engineering, the town's engineering requires 2 points of access. One can be an emergency vehicle only access. County Road 42, which is essentially road-based road, needs to be completely paved and rebuilt. When you add, it's a half a mile of roadway before you get to the site. And then on site, it's another quarter mile to extend it to our eastern boundary. And then the Elko, Box Elder Sanitation District wants to be able to bring a major interceptor line along 42 within the right-of-way that exists today, a major, probably a very large sanitary sewer interceptor line along the eastern boundary of our property. And in order to serve at some future date, all those properties to the north of us and east of us that are designated LDR currently as low-density residential. Additionally, the town actually has reached out to the landowner, Cottonwood Development Partners, to acquire an easement to extend their regional trail for over a half a mile from where it terminates now to the northern boundary of our property. And so that discussion has been happening, and we're going to do that. And if the town can wait, we'll do it on the backs of this project, extend this 10-foot wide trail within the 50 to 75-foot natural habitat buffer. But trying to do all of that on the backs of 75 lots is pretty much an impossibility. No, it is an impossibility, and would likely render this project undevelopable for a significant period of time, because as you can see in this image, on 42E, no one is going to come in. The property to the north is already developed, county subdivision. Property to the south is in the county. Actually, it's subdivided in the county currently, but it's identified as LDR. And I'm not sure what the plans are of developing that. So there will be no contribution to the extension of this property. And then once you get east, further east along there, it's all the property to the south, as we mentioned, the people that spoke earlier. That's a state residential property subdivided in the county, so there'll be no contribution to any of those improvements. So all of those improvements fall on the back of this project. And what we're asking for is 276 lots overall on 2650 on 76 acres, 76 acres. And I would assume Jim has done a pro forma and believes that that can be accomplished.
Just please know, I'm way down the road from rezonings that increase the density. I mean, we've seen that, and those are developers' rights, and I very much understand. Wild Wing, Saratoga Falls, we went through all that. That's not, it's just simply, we seem to have information presented. I'm not interested in necessarily holding this up entirely. Mrs. Hanson, I certainly encourage you and the other residents to repeat your concerns at council meeting, but I also trust in staff to present this in the light in which it needs to be presented, such that it does not get overlooked, and it subsequently presents an insurmountable roadblock to this, pun intended. Tom, I don't know if this is chicken and the egg, but I'm trying to avoid necessarily closing the barn door after the horse has already left here. So, Wendy, are you tracking a little better on this? If we advance this, Mike,
I think we have to trust the system that they're going to look at it again and again as we go forward.
Well said. Yeah, I'm at that council meeting too, and
This has to be the first step of a long hike.
Yeah, I understand that, and as long as we don't overlook it, and I don't think we will necessarily.
And I think just like the previous one, I don't have a strong basis to say no. Even though it's very pretty out there, somebody's going to develop that land. I'd rather them do it right than mess it up.
Yeah, well, I like the project. I do. I'm sorry about the other residents out there. Sometimes there's one more question you need to be asked. And in this case, could it be rezoned sometime in the future? I'm sorry, but I'd be remiss in reopening public comment at this point. Disservice here, he's been here already for a couple hours. Okay, any further questions? Logan, anything else we've not covered ad nauseum? All right. I'm sorry, Ms. Hanson, but unless staff tells me that it's pertinent to reopen public comment, I'd be remiss in not doing that. It would be, Scott, okay. All right. With that said, again, I encourage you, September 10th is the council meeting. We'll have plenty of hours on this. And again, we've got a good staff, and hearing Steve, who speaks very credibly all the time about these things, I think he's on top of it, and I'll trust to him to keep an eye on this as well. All right, commissioners, with that, I'd entertain a motion on business item 7A, Timnath Comprehensive Plan Amendment.
I can make a motion for item 7A, Timnath Shores Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Approval is recommended as discussed.
Very good. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And you are, Michael, you are now voting. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Very good. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, it carries on a 5-0 vote. Thanks, everybody. Any reports, by way of reports quickly, staff, anything else? Nothing? No? Okay. I understand from Bob's Rules and Order, I don't have to have a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.